And when fear starts to creep in, realize you don't have to be a victim of that fear. You don't have to stay in the grips of that fear. You have the power to say, okay, I don't have to be afraid of this. I'm an overcomer. I am stronger than this. This is not going to defeat me.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Enough. Hey Dee Dee.
Hello.
Good to be back here with you again.
I love it.
So we had a listener that reached out after our last podcast to tell us how much she loved the 3 T's. So that was super fun.
Oh, good.
But she said, one topic that I would love for you guys to talk about is COVID fatigue. And my first thought was, I'm so sick of talking about COVID. And I was like, oh, so that's COVID fatigue. Yes. We need to talk about it. And really, when I started thinking about talking about COVID fatigue, I thought, we have to be talking about it right now within our households and within our families, because we are venturing again into a time that things are looking a little unsure. And our kids are walking through this again. And this time, the first time around, they were walking through with uncertainty, which can be scary. Mm-hmm. This time, they're walking through with memories of the way that they were feeling, their teachers were feeling, or their parents were feeling about how the first round went. And I thought, you know what, this is a great topic for us to talk about, because I think this is the very time that we can set our families up going forward to be able to work through this, lower some anxiety, any potential depression that comes out of it. Like, we need to be talking. And so that means you and I need to be talking. Yes. So when I was thinking about hitting this next round and potential for, schools are starting again. Everybody was super excited to get back, but there's already kids that are home quarantining and districts that are just not sure how long they'll be at school. And one of the things I was thinking about is that because last year was very difficult for a lot of families, kids in many homes heard their parents talk about how difficult it was, whether it was difficult for their job or it was difficult balancing having the kids home and doing everything. They may have talked about how unsuccessful their student was at doing virtual school. And they may have just, really, and they may have seen things like their parents drinking more, maybe in some situations, parents fighting more. And even if the kids didn't see it while it was going on, they may have heard the stories afterwards on the toll that it took on their parents, because it was a hard time to get through that time. So the kids now, if we walk through it again, they're stepping into this with the memory of the burden that they were to their parents during that time because of the education situation. And when I started really thinking about that, I was concerned. I was concerned about students feeling more burdensome this time around because they heard their parents talking about how hard it was the first time around. Yeah. So I really started thinking, let's talk about how can we improve this situation? What do we need to be doing right now to assist our students and the parents? Like, how can we start these conversations so that they can be having these conversations in their household, so that this is not a walk down a bad memory lane that then may just add more burden so that it gets worse?
This is a great topic, because if we are at that point where we're teetering on, are we doing this again? Are we going for round 2 or not? And when I say round 2, I mean like the uncertainty around schools being open or closed, because we've had the summer that wasn't an issue, and now kids are getting back into school and things are starting to close down again. And it is just the uncertainty, I feel like, is overwhelming, but there's also fear. When you talk to people and you talk about, well, we may be going virtual again, there have been people that were like, no, don't say that. Don't say that. We even talked to when we were in Charleston.
Yes.
You and I were in Charleston. Nicole and I went to Charleston for the day. Friday.
Yes.
We were having a conversation on the street, and because some of those buildings had closed, some of the stores had closed just randomly.
Yeah, so let's walk them into the conversation. So
Yes.
we were walking down the street, and we had been walking around Charleston, and I was just saddened to see how many storefronts were empty, how many restaurants that I knew were shut down, had made limited hours. We talked to people in this hotel industry about how many rooms that they were not able to rent out, not because people weren't coming, but because they didn't have staff. And so you and I were walking along, and I wasn't even speaking that loud, I don't think. I don't think I was
it was just the two of us having a conversation.
And I said, I love being here, but this makes me so sad. I said, Dee Dee, do you think this is our new norm? And this lady was in front of us, and she turned around, and she had an aggressive voice. And she was like, no, this cannot be. And then
she turned around and said, do not even say that.
Okay.
You remember that? And we were like, what?
And she's like, no, this cannot be. Cannot be our norm. And then she just started going and going and going. And we were like, wow.
And she was going to meet her family, and they got to a restaurant that had closed unusually early for whatever reason, but they were being turned away at the door.
And it was literally like minutes after she was saying this to us. And then when she got there, they said they're closed. And she was like, of course it is. Like, because she was just so heated up by it.
But I think everybody's like that. We survived it. It was almost like we survived it. We can't do it again. We saw the toll that it took, and we just haven't had time to recover as a community, as a nation, as households, as individuals at times, to have recovered from everything that it meant. And the kids are resilient. They really are. But the level of depression amongst kids, the lack of energy to go do things is increasing. The level of depression is increasing. And there is fear around it. There is fatigue around it for everybody. Even teachers are on both sides of the spectrum, and that can be exhausting for a student. Like, kids are little sponges, and they're hearing all of these messages from the adults in their life, who are hearing messages from all the media sources and social media outlets and just conversations, and they're soaking it all in, and sometimes they don't know how to express it. And I feel like we need to start girding up, saying, okay, we might be doing this again. We don't know what we're doing. Sometimes the uncertainty is the worst part. If we just knew one way or the other. But like you said before, when we went into it, everybody was going into it like, whoa, what's happening? We've never experienced this before. But this time we're like, okay, do I need to go ahead and start buying the toilet paper or not? You know? And this is a great conversation for us to start getting mentally, physically, and emotionally prepared. I feel like the first time, a lot of us went into this more physically healthy, maybe.
Definitely. I think it took a toll on a lot of people's physical health.
And so going into this uncertain season, that needs to definitely be something that we are mindful of. And we're putting energy into building up, but assessing, where am I mentally? Where am I physically, emotionally, spiritually, all those different levels of help, and then saying, okay, what do I need to do to be ready? Now, don't start preparing for unknown situations.
Doomsday. We're not talking about doomsday preparation here.
We're talking about what do I need to do within myself to be ready for whatever the future holds, which really is a great way to live every single day.
Right. So one of the conversations, because we have started talking about it in my house, so if tomorrow we got a phone call that said that the district had reached that level red, our district is going by colors, if they reach level red and that they won't be opening the school doors, I don't think my kids will be surprised because we are having the conversations in the household right now. And one of the things that I haven't been doing, but as I started thinking about and preparing for this podcast, I thought is one of the things I want to be doing in my household is going, okay, how can we do it better this time, guys? Like what worked and what didn't work? And not just asking myself that, but letting the whole family talk about that.
Right.
We were all trying to figure out who went where for schoolwork and, you know, times and bedtimes, for example, you know, like the way the activities that we were doing and the schedules we were keeping, what worked last time, what didn't work, and how can we do it better this time? Do we want to set some new goals? If we are home, do we want to set some new goals for ourselves and use those as improvement goals, not something that's going to put us into a place of like, I don't want to start laying around all the time and eating and drinking. You know, I saw what happened last time when we crept into some areas and then we had to break some bad habits. I don't want to do that this time. But having those conversations ahead of time will put us in our position that we can set the guardrails up from the beginning.
Yeah, that's a great idea because last time it was like everybody, I don't want to say everybody, people had all different types of schedules. Within my own house, we had different schedules because my husband was in law enforcement and we are in manufacturing. We got to keep, we were shifting into acrylic shields because our customers needed shields to be able to open their businesses, which was their livelihood. So we were trying to shift our manufacturing lines. And so it was different for us. Some people were just home with nothing to do. And so, talking about it now, what worked, what didn't work, what did you like, what did you not like? My family would probably say, please, let's never play another game of bananagrams because we played that so many times. One thing that we did at the beginning last time of the shutdown was we had gone some of us had gone plant-based. So we were experimenting with new plant-based foods. And I was talking to a friend last night at a cookout who's gone plant-based. And I thought, you know, that was a good thing to do. So why don't we start that again? Like start those things to put health into my body in different areas so that I can be ready for what the future holds. Now, my immediate future is totally up in the air because we have got a huge number of life changes happening personally. So I've been thinking about how to transition my family during this uncertain time already. And so the COVID influence is just almost another smaller piece of that puzzle because there are so many life changes happening in our life. And thinking through that, but having the conversations, how do you feel about this? What are your thoughts about it? And making sure that I am in a place where I'm mentally strong, I'm grounded emotionally, I'm grounded in what I'm saying so that my family has a place to land. You know what I mean?
Yes. And I think by talking about it now, it also, because I do have a fear for children feeling like this is another burden on my parents and them feeling like the burden. Like not school, not the school buildings being closed, but they have become a hard burden for their parents. And I think we as parents, by having these conversations about, hey, how do we want to do things differently? That's a time that mom or dad can say, I know that you heard me say a lot of bad things about online schooling because mom doesn't really know how to do this. I was not supposed to be a teacher, and I didn't sign up to homeschool. So it was really hard for me. And I know that we're going to do it again. Mm-hmm. And it's not going to be a surprise this time. So I want you to know that if school gets called off again, I don't want you to worry that I'm going to freak out. Because I do feel like there could be an emotional reaction for kids that saw their parents really struggle through this time.
Yeah.
And I understand why they were struggling. I mean, there was a tremendous burden that was put on the parents, but we don't want the child to feel like the burden. But the only way that we can make sure that we are diffusing some of those feelings in our kids is to be talking about it.
Mm-hmm. And here's a tip. If you have a kid that's not a talker, that doesn't like to open up with conversation, one way to get to see what's on your child's heart is to write back and forth. Have we ever talked about this? I don't know if we have.
We did talk about it in another podcast, but you can go ahead and...
So one of the things that my oldest daughter's teacher taught me when she was in 3rd grade was to have a little journal back and forth. It can just be a notebook, but you can write down a question. How are you doing? Or was there anything about the COVID shutdown last time, or anything about virtual school last time that scares you this time? You're worried about? I mean, whatever you would typically ask your child. And then you just leave it on their bed or their pillow. That's what we did. And then when she was ready to write, because she would write and write. But if you asked her to say it verbally, she did not want to talk about it face to face. She would write and share what was in her heart. Now, obviously, this was many years ago when we were talking about 3rd grade things and things that were in her 3rd grade mind. And I was pregnant at the time, so some of the fears and concerns she had around that. But that was a really great way to reach her. Don't feel like you have to sit down and have a family meeting, or you have to sit down and hash it out over the kitchen table or something. You might meet one-on-one. It might be a family meeting thing, or you might just write back and forth. It may be text back and forth. Mm-hmm. Send me a meme of what you think about shutting back down. We
beating
sometimes
your
have
head on the table.
Yeah,
I love that one. That's a good one. Send me a meme.
Yeah,
we could have a lot of fun with that in our family. That's a good one for teenagers.
So when McKenna and Kelsey were in high school, sometimes we would just have conversation chains of just memes, and it was hilarious.
Oh, I love that.
It got to where at one of the lunch tables, their friends were wanting to see these conversations going back and forth, but it was so funny, and it was a way to spark conversation with them. So,
and as adults, so you mentioned earlier having these conversations about things that you did, like going plant-based and trying that. Mm-hmm. But at this time, we need to start thinking about what we're not going to do and what are we going to do. But let's start drawing the lines now for ourselves. We saw when we go back to last year and start remembering the way things were, the way things we felt during that time, the way we looked at things, where we spent our time, what we watched, what we scrolled through, who we talked to. Start making commitments to ourselves of what are the things we're going to do to make improvements, and what are the things that we will not do this time because we saw that it didn't serve us well last time. And we can start setting all of that up right now. We don't know what things look like, but I know the places I don't want to go again. So I can totally set that in stone right now.
And give yourself grace. Like, understand, we were all trying to figure it out. Mm-hmm. If you were short-tempered, if you were a yeller, if you were drinking from the moment you got up until you went to bed just to, get through the day, whatever it was, if you were overeating, emotional eating, whatever it was where you look back and you're like, oh, I can't believe that was me. I don't like that I did that. Give yourself grace and say, okay, that was me in that moment, and that doesn't define who I have to be now. It doesn't define who I am. I can change it. I can do it differently. And maybe looking back, you realize I need to apologize to my family or my friends or my children or whomever you need to apologize to. Like, I'm looking back and I didn't really like that version of myself.
So if we started looking, we don't have control over this part of it, but if we looked at it like a redo, like it doesn't have, if we didn't like the way it went the first time around, it doesn't have to be that way again.
Right.
But if we don't talk about it and if we just sit here and go, no, don't say that word, don't say quarantine, don't say COVID, don't say, because we have COVID fatigue, it's not going to serve our families well.
Mm-mm. And one thing with all the life changes we have coming up, I told Ken recently, we need to get really good at communication. You and I do, because we often struggle in the area of effective communication. We say things that are misunderstood, or we don't clearly explain something to the other person. Communication, still 21 years later, is a struggle to vocalize what it is we're trying to say and to hear what the other person is saying. And I think that goes along with this too. Truly, we have got to become excellent communicators, which means we're going to become excellent listeners. There are lots of books on it, on communication. One is called Fierce Conversations, which is it's not as aggressive as the title sounds. It's powerful because it says the conversation is the relationship, which makes so much sense. And so I highly, highly, highly recommend reading that book, going into it. Also, Carol Dweck's book about mindset. It's about growth mindset. Fantastic book going into this season. Even if you're not a reader, get those books, crack them open, skim them, and start putting some of those tips into practice. Start putting some of those systems into practice and realizing how important the way we communicate with each other is. It is the life or death of a relationship, truly. Not to be over dramatic, but no, it really is.
It is. And we're all in this together, guys. I mean, that is one thing that, although we all have different situations in each individual household and each person, but all of us are navigating these waters together. So reaching out, having people that you can talk to and lean on, and peers and mentors that you can ask questions for. Seeking community during this times, because sometimes it's easier to feel like we should just hide, like that, even mentally, like because we're physically told to not move around as much, we also mentally don't move around as much and have active communication with people. And we are not supposed to feel alone. I mean, that's what the enemy wants, right? Absolutely. The enemy wants us to feel alone, but we're all in this together. So reaching out to people who love you and being able to speak openly is huge.
And people who speak life into you instead of doom and gloom, like that's the community you want to form and build. And when fear starts to creep in, realize you don't have to be a victim of that fear. You don't have to stay in the grips of that fear. You have the power to say, okay, I don't have to be afraid of this. I'm an overcomer. I am stronger than this. This is not going to defeat me. What can I do? And start saying things that empower you to see what you can do in the situation. But don't just let fear destroy you. Don't stay there. Because it will. It will.
And listen to more podcasts that speak life into you. So if you would like to hear more of our podcasts or learn more about what we do as life coaches, please go to our Facebook page It's www.liveyourdesign.life.